Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Thanks for being a part of our community. My name is Valen Kolika, and I will be your host for today. Just a few reminders before we kick off. If at any time you experience issues viewing the stream and are using the web browser version of Teams, please refresh your browser. If you're using the desktop app of Microsoft Teams, please exit and rejoin. Um, Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars. Closed captions in several languages are available during the live broadcast, and you can enable them by clicking on the CC button located at the lower right corner of your screen. Feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A window by clicking on the Ask a Question button. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. If you prefer, you can post your question anonymously, and you can do so by checking the box right below where you enter it. Now, we often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time. However, in the event if the answer was not provided, or if you simply have additional questions post this session, please don't hesitate to raise them on our Azure Security Center forum that is in TC at aka.ms/ASC community. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to ask a question. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars, and you can do so at aka.ms/security-webinar feedback. I would also like to invite you to join us, our public community, by visiting us on aka.ms/security community. Now, that's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, which, by the way, you can sign up at aka.ms/security-prp. You can request features, give feedback, review our product roadmaps, register for events, or just join on webinars like this. And we believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. As I already announced in yesterday's webinar, as well as communicated through our channels, and sorry for the short notice, but due to the unforeseen logistical issues for today's session, we will cover the topic of demystifying Azure Defender once for all, instead of the better together story of Azure Security Center and Microsoft Defender for endpoints. We are postponing the latter session for later this summer and will publish the registration at aka.ms/security-webinars. So in today's session, Yuri, Diogenes, and Safeena Begum will be providing us a comprehensive approach on Azure Defender's integration with Azure Security Center. Yuri is a principal PM and Safeena a senior PM, both with Azure Security Center. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to them. Yuri, Safeena, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Valen. Hello, everyone. As Valen said, we changed the topic a little bit, but we are very excited because there's a lot of good things to talk about, and there is always questions about what Azure Defender is. So this session, Demystifying Azure Defender once for all, has exactly this intent, to make sure that you leave the session know exactly what Azure Defender is, how to utilize, how to leverage this capability. Again, my name is Yuri Diogenes, Principal PM on the Azure Security Center CXC team, and I have with me my friend Safeena.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. My name is Safeena. I work with Yuri and the team. I work in the Azure Security Center Customer Experience team, and I'm so glad to be here.
All right, so let's get started here. Before diving into more details about Azure Defender, just a little recap about two major principles, CSPM and CWPP. And I want to remind you that security hygiene should be your #1 priority. Although the session today is more towards threat detection, before threat detection, what comes really into the mind of anyone that manages security posture is security hygiene. So you need to understand that in order to reduce the likelihood that you might be compromised, you need to address and remediate all security recommendations that you currently have. We notice over time, and this is just an example of our security reports that show threat actors utilizing the COVID as the main theme to launch attacks across different workloads in the cloud, on-prem. The fact of the matter is they understand the motivations and the current theme that are being used, and they understand that security hygiene is something that not a whole lot of organizations take very seriously. There is a lot of investment in threat detection, but when it comes to proactive work, things are still needs a lot of improvement. So we noticed this trend with COVID last year, and we continue to monitor and establish new detections and security best practice for you to address. So make sure to prioritize security hygiene. Everyone sometimes asks me what is the ideal security score when dealing with Azure Security Center, and I always evangelize that the ideal is 100% because there are no reasons to leave doors open. Think of Azure Security Center as your alarm system that is telling you that there are a lot of doors that are open and you should be closing those doors. So make sure to remediate those security recommendations. It's a journey that starts somewhere. You might be in 30% today. It doesn't mean that you cannot reach 100%. So make sure that you have all the processes in place to take care of that. Now, when it comes to Azure Security Center, we are a platform that aggregates two major platforms within the product. In the past, before Ignite last year, we used to have Azure Security Center free and standard tier, where the standard tier was more towards cloud workload protection. After Ignite, we rebranded our CWPP, the workload protection platform, to call Azure Defender. This was a strategical move. It was not only a rebrand, but it was more a strategical thing to align with the directions that we were going. And today, what we have is Azure Security Center free for cloud security posture management for the most part, which means that all the proactive work that you do can be used with Azure Security Center free tier. Now, if you need the threat detection capabilities or the multi-cloud capabilities, then you have to upgrade to Azure Defender. And when you upgrade to Azure Defender, you have a granular way to select only the workloads that you want to upgrade. So Azure Defender is an umbrella of threat detections. You have Azure Defender for SQL, for VMs, for containers, and many more. The way that those threat detections are created are based on the different phases of an attack according to the CyberQ chain. So you're going to have threat detections that were built specifically for a workload. For example, threat detections for SQL had in mind the CyberQ chain for a SQL database, because the threat vector of a SQL database is not the same as Azure VM or a container. So it changes according to the workload. So we have security researchers creating those threat detections according to the different phases. And the ideal thing when you are investigating or when you are looking at threat actors is you want to make sure that you detect an attack in the beginning of the CyberQ chain, right? So for example, let's talk about RDP brute force attack. This is an attack that happens right in the beginning, trying to compromise the system. So if you are able to identify the threat actor at that point, the likelihood that you can prohibit, you can block access to that attacker to move forward in the CyberQ chain, you are going to be successful, not allowing that attacker to move laterally and exploit other things, right? Now, if you do not catch the attack in that phase, you still have other phases that we have analytics that will benefit and allow you to catch the attacker on the different phases. Each one of those Azure Defender plans will have threat detections for the different phases of the CyberQ chain. We have invest a lot on threat detection throughout the years, and this is the current portfolio that we have for threat protection, not only in Azure VMs, but across different hybrid workloads. These are the ones that are in GA, the other ones in public preview, and down below you have two that are in public preview that are what we call the Azure Service Layer with Azure Management in Azure DNS. I'm going to cover all of those in more details. I just wanted to show you this diagram to give an overview of the offer that we have right now, the current stage of each offer, and give a visualization of the depth of those threat protections that we have across the different workloads. So let's get deep into each one of those. Let's start with Azure Defender for Server. Okay, so you have Azure Security Center free tier, and you decide that you want to use Azure Defender for Server. So with one click, you go ahead and you upgrade for Azure Defender for Server. So what is the big deal? Why do I need to upgrade for Azure Defender for Server? Well, you get a whole lot of things when you upgrade for Azure Defender for Server. You get the integration with the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, MDE, which is formerly known as MDATP. So you get this for server platform, which means that as soon as you onboard a server 2016, a server 2019, that server will receive the MDE. You also get native threat detection for Windows and Linux. This is something that we develop in Azure Defender for Server itself. So you have this from the core OS perspective, regardless of having the MD sensor or not. You also have additional capabilities that are included, such as vulnerability assessment, just-in-time VM access, adaptive application control, file integrity monitor, adapt network hardening, network map. All those things are part of Azure Defender for Server. So I want to make it very clear, because I receive a lot of questions about, is Azure Defender for Servers a new anti-malware? What is that, right? So Azure Defender for Servers is aggregation of many capabilities that you can have, not only for Azure VMs, but also for on-prem or even VMs that are in different cloud providers. So think about that. If you have VMs running in AWS or VMs running in GCP, you'll be able to have these capabilities there. If you need vulnerability assessment in VMs that are in GCP or VMs that are in the AWS, you are going to be able to do that. There is an onboarding process that needs to take place to onboard those VMs that are in the different cloud providers. We leverage Azure Arc to do that. But the fact is, once you enable Azure Defender for Server, you have this available for you, not only for Azure VMs, but also for VMs that are not in Azure. So that's very important. The other thing that you unblock is the capabilities that are here. For example, regulatory compliance. This is something that you also unblock once you enable Azure Defender for Server. Cloud connectors. So if you need to have visibility across different cloud providers, you use something that we call the cloud connectors. You have a connector for AWS, a connector for GCP. And once you connect to those platforms, you'll be able to see secure posture management recommendations in one single place, which is the Azure Security Center dashboard. So you are able to manage the secure posture of your different cloud providers in one single place. So think about all the options that you get once you make this transition to Azure Defender for Server. So I hope that this is very clear. Again, Azure Defender for Server is not one single product, right? It's an aggregation of many capabilities that you get for VMs, regardless if the VMs is in Azure or in the different cloud provider or even on-prem. So this is the value that you get for that. Azure Defender for Storage, okay? Now, Azure Defender for Storage is a very unique space, because there is a lot of organizations that are starting to use storage accounts, and they want to have some sort of visibility about what's happening with the storage accounts. They want to understand if someone is trying to compromise information that is on the storage account. So they want to look at those suspicious activities. So the way it works is you enable Azure Defender for storage, which can be for blob containers, file shares, and data lakes in Azure with one single click in your Azure Security Center dashboard. Now, the storage account is a very unique situation because you can enable this bundle just like any other for the entire subscription, or you can go to each storage account and enable separately. Let's say if you have 100 storage accounts and you decided that you want to enable this only for 50, you can do that. Otherwise, if you want to enable to all storage accounts, you just enable on the subscription level. So once you enable this with one click, there is no side effect. This is a common question that I receive. There will be any impact on my performance or anything? And the answer is no. You are just flipping the switch to say at that point on, I want you to look at the activities and trigger a potential alert if something happens. So when you enable that, we're going to be looking at suspicious access patterns, such as suspected access from a Tor exit node coming from a suspicious source. We look at our Microsoft Threat Intelligence to identify that. We look to suspicious activities such as anomalous data extraction. So we use that as well to trigger alerts. Upload of malicious content. That's something that we also look. We use a system called hash reputation analysis to look at the file and see if that hash is part of a compromised hash. We look at our threat intel to identify that, and we trigger a security alert. Now, you can automate the security alert. If you watch yesterday's presentation from Tony and Nicholas, they talk about automation. So you can leverage all that automation for this type of alert to say, hey, once I receive an alert that the file was uploaded and this file has a compromised hash, a suspicious hash, I want to delete this file, or I want to move this file to some other place. So you can do that as well directly from Security Center using the workflow automation capability, or if you are using Sentinel, you do the automation from there as well. So this is the way that the Azure Defender for Storage operates, and this is basically how it works. So it's very straightforward. We do have a comprehensive documentation of all analytics that are available for Azure Defender for Storage. So if you go to our docs and you look for alert reference page, you will see that we trigger alerts for phishing content hosted on storage account, for the storage account identified as sources for distribution of malware. So there's a lot of things that we are able to identify and trigger an alert, okay? The other Azure Defender plan that we have is the Azure Defender for Key Vault. Again, another scenario where you have your Key Vault and you want to understand, you want to have more visibility to understand if there is any unusual activity going on, potential harmful attempts to access or exploit your Key Vault accounts. So this layer of protection allows you to address these types of intervention potential threats, right? So different from the storage account, when you enable the Azure Defender for Key Vault, you have to enable on the subscription level. So all the Key Vault accounts that you have on the subscription level will have this protection enabled on it, okay? Here are some examples of use case scenarios. Usually we do two parts. For most of those plans, we do the secure posture management recommendations. So we trigger recommendations for Key Vault, for hardening purpose, and we have the alerts that could be also triggered according to some scenarios. Lots of activities that we do in this layer, we do using machine learning. So there's a lot, we are investing heavily on that perspective, mainly for Key Vaults. And we will build the model to understand, for example, if someone is trying to download a bunch of keys to detect malicious activities. So there is a lot of sophistication going on behind the scenes to create those alerts. Again, those alerts are fully documented in our reference alerts page at docs.microsoft.com Security Center page. Now, this one is very interesting, Azure Defender for Resource Management. This one is right now is in public preview. So this one you can enable right now. There is no cost to it yet because it is in public preview. Now, the Azure Defender for Resource Manager is a game changer because we are now looking at activities that are running on the resource manager level. So there is a lot of things going on there. We identify a lot of potential malicious activities when we look at this level. For example, threat actors that are trying to manipulate VM's extension without even opening the VM directly from the Azure Resource Management layer. So that's a very common scenario, and we are able to detect that. So while Key Vault, storage, those are very specific for storage and for Key Vault, the Resource Manager is basically for a lot of things, right? Because it aggregates all the resources that make calls to the Resource Manager. So it doesn't matter if it is a VM or a storage or a web app. These workloads will make calls to the Resource Manager. So this is the reason why this threat detection is so powerful, because we are able to identify a lot of scenarios, malicious activities that can take place on this layer. One of the things that we look at is exploitation using microbust toolkit. A lot of threat actors are using microbursts to enumerate accounts, enumerate resources in the subscription to do exploitation. It is a benign tool, but can also be used for reconnaissance of the environment. So we do a lot of things to identify those scenarios. Right now, we are focusing 3 major categories of use cases: the suspicious high privileged activities, the suspicious user access, and the malicious Azure pen test toolkit usage. So we have Microbust, as I said, and PowerZuri toolkit. So those toolkits are extensively used for pen testing purpose. As you know, pen test is a benign operation. It's usually done by the red team, but threat actors will leverage those tools to do something malicious or to obtain more information about the environment before they start to compromise things. So we look at all those things and we trigger alerts. And again, those alerts are documented in our reference alert page. Azure Defender for DNS, this is also new. This is currently in public preview, which means that there is no price tag attached to it, and you can go and enable, validate, test, and see if it is useful for you. In this particular case, we are only looking at Azure DNS activities. We receive a lot of questions from customers if this is available for DNS installed on a VM. And at this moment, this is not available for this purpose. This is only for Azure DNS only. So we look at a lot of things in this scenario. We look to anomalous network protection usage, trying to anonymize network activity through DNS. These are some of the scenarios that we are looking at right now: malicious domain access and attack through DNS queries. So there's a lot of activities going on, mainly around DNS cache poisoning, DNS tunneling, all those things. We are able to identify calls to dark web, phishing activities. All those things are detected by our analytics. Our analytics, again, are fully documented, and you can go to the page. We also have a tech community page available with some steps that you can utilize to validate this threat detection. Okay. All right, so let me go through some demo here real quick. Let me alternate to the demo environment. And in this demo, I want to show a couple of things related to threat detection. So the first thing that I want to show is the Secure Alerts dashboard. This dashboard, we are continuously incorporating new filters and new capabilities. So I want you to, if you've been working with Azure Security Center for a long time, you can see that the look and feel of this page has changed over time. It's very similar to Sentinel, Azure Sentinel right now, to keep a seamless experience. That's the whole point. If you look at this page, you will see that we added some options on the top here. We have the alert suppression rules that allows you to configure alert suppression according to your needs. So for example, let's say you have your red team performing some pen test activities and you are receiving a lot of false positives. This is a good scenario where you can create a suppression rule to say for the next 5 days, if this alert pops up, I want to suppress. Now, when you suppress an alert, the only thing that you are doing is you are changing the status of the alert. The status of the alert is active by default. When you create a suppression, what you're doing is you're changing to dismissed. So you can still hear the alert, but it's dismissed by default. Okay. The other thing that we added is the sample alerts capabilities. Very important. We receive a lot of feedback about this because customers want to validate some scenarios. So if you look at here, all the alerts that we have here are alerts for the Azure Defender plans that are in GA. That's why you don't have, for example, Azure for Resource Manager, Azure Defender for Azure DNS is not here because it's not GA yet. What is the point of this simulation, this sample alert? It's really to validate, to test some scenarios. For example, let's say that you are not utilizing this dashboard to investigate. You are connecting Azure Defender with Azure Sentinel, and you want to test the alert flow. For example, the alert reads Azure Defender, you want to see if it reads Azure Sentinel, or if you are using another SIEM platform such as Splunk, you want to see if when the alerts reads Azure Defender, it flows to Splunk. So you can test the entire flow. So that's one scenario that the sample alert will use. The other scenario is you want to validate the information that you have on the alerts, the metadata, right? For example, this here suspicious WordPress theme detected is a sample alert. There is a tag here called sample alert. But when you click on view full details, you have the entire metadata here, the fields that will be available. So this is a very good way for you if you are preparing some playbooks to understand the metadata that is available for that alert. Keep in mind that for all alerts that we are triggering, we have something called take action, which is very important. Let me get a real alert here so I can show the value of this take action, because I want to really emphasize that our intent here is to not only show that something bad happened, because this is an alert, so it means that something already did happen, but also close the loop, right? If there is anything that you could have done in the past to prevent this, we're gonna list here on this prevent feature attacks. And usually what we list here is a recommendation that you didn't address, right? So we are trying to close the loop between the detection and the proactive work that you should have done by remediating your recommendation. So there is a direct correlation. Many times an alert, the reason why you receive that alert in the first place is because you forget to do something. And this is a perfect example, right? So here I have 3 major recommendations that were not addressed. That's why my dashboard got exposed. So this is a great way for the team that manages incident response to go back to the cloud security posture management team and say, look, you need to address those things because of those open recommendations is that we got exploited, right? So make sure that every time that you review an alert, don't review only from the reactive lenses, but also from the proactive. And from the proactive perspective, you got to go to the take actions and look at this field here. Okay, so that's where everything is going to aggregate in the Secure Alerts dashboard, and this is the experience that I wanted to share with you. So I'm gonna hand over to Safeena right now, so she can continue the presentation and show the other plans.
Thank you, Yuri. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, it's all good, Safeena. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Yuri. That was such a valuable information. I would like to start by talking about the protection that we offer for Azure Defender for SQL. So to start with, Azure Defender for SQL comes with two Azure Defender plans that kind of extends the Azure Security Center's data security package. One of them being a protection towards your SQL databases, Azure SQL databases, meaning protection towards your Azure SQL database, Azure SQL managed instance, and even if you have a dedicated SQL pool in Azure Synapse. So we offer protection for all of these. And the other plan being the protection of SQL servers on the machines in order to support the hybrid environments. And it also makes it easy to monitor your on-premise and multi-cloud servers where it is leveraging Azure Arc, and you can view all of your protected SQL servers regardless of where they are running in a single pane of glass, which is in the Azure Security Center dashboard. But important point to remember is you need to have a log analytics agent on your SQL Server's host, and that is how Azure Defender can scan and keep track of your machines no matter where they are located. So say, for example, I have a customer who has a scenario where they have hosted their SQL Server on-premise Windows machine. You can connect this Windows machine to the Security Center with the help of Azure Arc, or you can also choose to connect the machine without Azure Arc by just installing the Log Analytics agent and onboarding it to the Azure Security Center. I'll briefly discuss about what are the types of Defender for SQL alerts that we look for in the next screen. But before that, in this architectural diagram, I want to highlight the Azure Sentinel piece here. So whether an alert is generated by Azure Defender or received by Azure Defender from a different security product, you have an option to export it for tracking purposes and with other monitoring tools in your environment. Though the diagram here highlights only Azure Sentinel, but you could also export it to any other third-party SIEM tools as well. But with the help of the continuous export option in the Security Center, and you get this capability where you can fully customize what data you want to export and what data will go where. Like you can configure it to send it to the Event Hub or Log Analytics workspace or any third-party SIEM tool that you may have. So that was a brief about what Azure Defender for SQL is, but I want to go through a few examples and some use case scenarios of top security issues we identify day in and day out from the customers with the help of Azure Defender for SQL. So in SQL, if you think about it, usually the common popular threats that we see is the SQL injection, right? I'm sure most of you are familiar of that, and brute force attacks, obviously, right? So which are kind of utilizing the public interface, like attacking for an application in a case if the SQL is open to the internet, right? So the attacker is trying to do a brute force attack directly to the SQL. Usually a lot of attackers, be it internal or external, might exfiltrate the data. So if there is a sensitive information inside the SQL, they would look into it. And we also noticed that some of the attackers are looking to exploit the machine that's running on the SQL. Here I'm talking about the crypto miner or any lateral movement in the organization, that can happen. Again, all of these is just the typical example of what we, but what we clearly see for, from our experience is customers struggle. They have data assets all over the world in the hybrid environment and even the multi-cloud environments. And unfortunately, most of the organization struggles to protect the data assets. But the good news is Azure Defender offers this powerful capability in order to protect these data assets with very minimal effort. So it's just a click of a button that you have to do in the Security Center dashboard under pricing and settings and choosing your subscription, and then enabling the Azure Defender for SQL option, and it will continuously monitor your SQL servers for threats like these. And then, like I said, you can push these threats or alerts to the different SIM tools as well. Okay. Now, on that point, I want to introduce you to one of the automations that we wrote, which is the brute force attack. So when a threat is actually detected by Azure Defender, what is important is, of course, taking action on the threat, but the super important point is how fast you take action on the threat, right? Because it just takes few seconds to minutes for a bad actor to do the lateral movement in your environment, right? So this automation will help you in that particular context. So say, for example, if a security center detects a brute force attack and it would fire an alert in the dashboard. So when the workflow automation notices that this alert has been kicked in the security center dashboard, it will immediately kick off this logic cap here, and it blocks the attacking IP by denying the NSG rule to the attacked VM, and it will also send you an email alert that so-and-so activity has happened and this action has been taken, and it will point you to the Security Center dashboard, which is cool, right? Because like I said, how fast you take care of the alert is very crucial to stop the alert spread. And you have the link to the automation here in the slides for you to refer it in future. So that was about SQL. Now I want to talk about the protection that we offer for Azure AKS Kubernetes clusters. But before I dive into the actual details of the solution on what Defender for AKS offers, I want to take a minute to explain how Kubernetes works. So this architectural diagram pretty much explains it. So in Kubernetes, you have a master node, and which is also called as a control plane, and we have worker nodes. So as you notice here in this diagram, the master node includes the API server, so the API server here controls every management activity in the cluster. And talking about the worker nodes, and they are the ones that are actually running the actual workload, the actual applications. And then we have pods in each node under each worker node, as you notice, right? Which are the Kubernetes native components. They are running containers as well. So in simple terms, one or more containers are running inside the pod, and a pod could have one or more pod or even a worker node. So like you notice here, we have multiple worker nodes that's running in the multiple pods, and that is running containers. So with this brief understanding, and to be respectful of the time, I will walk you through how Azure Defender protects AKS clusters. So in the Kubernetes protection, we are covering hardening, policy, and enforcement in runtime from the security domain. So Azure Defender provides threat protection at different levels, at host levels, as well as at the AKS cluster level. So we provide you recommendations and best practices in order to configure your AKS cluster according to the Azure Security Benchmark. And we also offer for container nodes, Docker CIS benchmark, which customers usually like to follow, whether they are using Docker CIS or Kubernetes CIS. Now, in the runtime threat detection, what we are doing is we are detecting suspicious activities using two-layered approach, one on the node and another one on the cluster. So in the cluster, we have an agentless approach where we have a backend-to-backend integration with AKS, where we can get the information directly from the AKS, and the customer does not have to provision anything, and there's no onboarding that needs to be done here. So this is the cool option. What we released recently is the admission control policy management, where we provide capabilities to audit and or even enforce security best practices, not on the cluster, but on the workload themselves, and then that are running inside the cluster. So I want to take a minute to speak about the admission control policies, because this is a new feature, and this is very interesting and powerful feature. So this provides us kind of a shift left, because we are using a gatekeeper project, which is an open source project that is contributed by Google and Microsoft together to the community. So this gatekeeper is actually a Azure policy add-on for Kubernetes. So when you open Azure Security Center dashboard, and if you click on the recommendations, you might notice a recommendation called Azure policy add-on for Kubernetes should be installed. Many of the customers wonder, what is this all about? So this recommendation is also contributing to overall secure score. So what happens in the backend when you enable this add-on is there are a bunch of recommendations, at least 17 of them to be specific, that gets added. And with the help of this recommendation, we are actually auditing each request to the Kubernetes API server. Because remember, I told API server is the heart of the AKS cluster. So every request of the Kubernetes API server is monitored before it is being persisted to the cluster, so that we protect your AKS cluster. And each recommendation will show you the components that you're violating. Like, for example, in this screenshot that you're seeing here on my screen, this recommendation is referring to the container images that should be deployed from trusted registries only. So the trusted registries is something customer would define on what it would be. Maybe it's a registry that's owned by Microsoft, or with a specific prefix or suffix, no matter what, right? So those images that are running from untrusted registries will be identified and will be listed in the Security Center dashboard under the recommendations section, highlighting you that there are some untrusted registries that has been run in your environment, and so on and so forth. So this is a new feature we released, in order to protect, and which will provide you a brand new experience. Okay, now I want to quickly start talking about Azure Defender for ACR, so container registries. This has we have a vulnerability scanner to scan the images, and then it provides a deeper visibility into your images vulnerabilities. I assume most of you are aware, we've joined forces with Qualys, and Qualys is it's the integrated scanner that we use in the Azure Defender, which is powered by Qualys for vulnerability management and scanning container images. So for the people who don't know what Qualys is a market leader in vulnerability assessment and management space. And Microsoft, as you know, is committed to deliver best of breed solutions to our customers. So the partnership of these two scenarios works perfectly here. So to take benefit of this additional extra layer of security, you need to enable Azure Defender for Container registry bundle in the Security Center dashboard. If you click on the pricing and settings option and choose your subscription and enable the Azure Defender for Container, and that's about it. It's once you onboard that bundle, from that point onwards, every registry under that subscription will be scanned, so that the images that will be pushed to the registry will be automatically scanned upon push. Talking about that, I want to speak about the options that we have. So we spoke about seamless deployment and configuration. It's just one click of a button that you have to do, right? So now talking about image scan and ship. So there are actually 3 triggers for an image scan. So whenever an image is pushed to your registry, Azure Security Center automatically scans that image. And on import is meaning the images that you import, say, for example, if you have imported from a Docker Hub that will be scanned. And I'll speak about the third one in a minute. But the way it works is when an image is pushed, the Azure Security Center will scan that image using the scanner that's powered by Qualys. And it is run in the isolated sandbox, and it extracts the known vulnerabilities, and then Azure Security Center will again filter and classify those findings from the scanner, and it displays the recommendations like these, okay, within the dashboard. And recently we announced image scan in runtime. So we used to offer on push on import option so far, but now we are also continuously scanning images that are active and that have been pulled from the registry and that's running in the Kubernetes clusters. So, Azure Defender will rescan these images periodically, and after the scans, if it finds any vulnerabilities, it's gonna display it in the dashboard. So it is a continuous scan process, and the great point about this is that I'm sure you will like is you're charged only per image. You're not charged for the rescans, so which is cool, right? So you can take benefit of this functionality and keep track of the vulnerabilities that comes up. I could take you to the portal very quickly. Here, and in the recommendations itself, you should be able to see if there are any containers vulnerabilities that has been found by the Azure Security Center. So it will display with this kind of a recommendation, right? And it will display the information about the affected resources and the findings that it has found, and so on and so forth, with more details about what this vulnerability is all about and the affected resources, which is so clear. And now if you want to refer additional information, we have hyperlinks at each of these options that you could choose and read more about it. Now, as you might have heard that we have open query option here, where all the Azure Security Center data is being exposed to the Azure Resource Graph Explorer as well. So now when I run this query, I should be able to see all the affected machines, and I do have an option to download this as CSV or open this query and so on and so forth, right? Now, if I go back here, I do have an option where I can disable the rule. Say, for example, if there is this ID that I think it's not valuable for my subscription, I do have an option to choose the subscription, and I could disable the rule, or I could exempt a specific resource from this recommendation, right? So things like these are super helpful for organizations. Now I'm gonna go back here and start presenting my slide. Like I said, with the continuous image scans, it might get tedious for customers to keep track of scans and resolve the vulnerabilities. So I want to point you to an automation that we created that will help customers receive an email notification as soon as Azure Security Center finds any new vulnerabilities per image. So this logic app is configured to run every day. That will help you keep track of your container image health. So make sure to check it out, and as usual, provide us the feedback of what you think about it. I showed briefly the demo. To be respectful of the time, I want to get to the next topic, which is Azure Defender for App Service. This is one of the apps. Azure App Service is one of the Azure's most popular service, and not new to many of you, I'm sure. So it's fully managed platform for building and hosting your web applications in the programming language of your choice, without worrying about managing the infrastructure. So we noticed that vulnerabilities in the web applications are frequently exploited by the attackers because request to the applications that's running on top of the app service actually goes through several gateways, right? So it's very important that you protect them. And if there are vulnerabilities, you detect them and take care of them as soon as possible. So Azure Defender for App Service helps you immensely on that area. So the moment you turn on the Defender for App Service, your applications are continuously monitored, and Azure Defender leverages, the scale of the cloud to identify the attacks on your app service applications. So it focuses on, emerging attacks, and it scans your app services. And if it identifies any vulnerabilities across multiple websites, it goes ahead and displays it here in the dashboard. These are the examples of some of the attacks that we have seen. One of the most important threat that we identify is that we released recently is dangling DNS protections. So dangling DNS starts when your custom DNS from your domain's DNS zone is mapped to the Azure resource that is not provisioned anymore, right? So this is one of the important attacks that is very difficult to identify, and Azure Defender for App Service will help you detect this kind of threats now. And this is just an example. Another very important attack that we identify is fileless attack. So if there is a file download from a malicious source or anonymous IP, then which is a very popular one, right? So we identify that. So so make sure you are using Azure Defender to protect your past services, and then please help your organization's environments stay secure and then make your life easy. So with that, I want to pass it off over to my friend Yuri to close it off and provide some additional resources. And I hope this was helpful.
Thank you, Safeena. Great presentation. Thanks everyone that participates, sending questions. Thanks for the team, Team Awesome, for answering all those questions. These are some of the resources that we have available for you. Easy links. You can just, for example, if you want right now, get a screenshot of this to quick access the documentation, the AKA. The documentation we are always updating. There is almost like weekly updates on the What's News page. There is also the Azure Security Center in the Field program on our YouTube channel. It's a bi-weekly program where I interview engineers, developers that are creating the product, and you can see more in-depth information about each one of those features. There is the Azure Security Center Ninja training, which is a comprehensive 8 modules from 100 level to 400 level that you can ramp up in Azure Security Center. There is a labs that we have as well in the GitHub. This lab is fantastic because you can basically provision your own environment, do everything within 30 days, will be completely free, right? Because you can get an Azure trial and then upgrade to Azure Defender free for 30 days and test all the scenarios. So make sure to visit the lab and have some hands-on opportunity with this lab. And last but not least, some other websites that we have available for you to access Azure Security Center. Make sure to access and share your feedback. And I think we have just one final word about take actions today, right? Enable Security Center. Look, Security Center free tier, as the name says, is free. There is absolutely no reason for you to not be utilizing this on your Azure subscriptions. Make sure to utilize, activate, start working on the recommendations, work to make sure that the security score is growing and you reach 100%. If you don't want to use Azure Defender for a cost or something, at least make sure that your security posture is better by addressing those security recommendations. And then you can do a POC and upgrade to Azure Defender free for 30 days and validate some of the scenarios, right? That's the idea. You can validate, see which workloads you want to protect, and then deploy those plans. Thanks for joining. I think we have a little bit of time, 4 minutes for questions in case there are questions. Okay.
Thank you both, Safeena and Yuri, for an excellent presentation. And yes, we got a big volume of questions, but the team has done a great job on responding them on demand. And there is the one question that I was able to find that was not answered, although is on a network security side, but perhaps maybe you can answer, or somebody. With the Defender for DNS, does that work with firewall and DDoS protection?
They are not correlated. So Azure DNS is pure for DNS. There will be some network-related activities that Azure Defender for DNS is able to identify, but it does not replace or substitute none of those solutions. It's way more like complementary than anything else.
Great, thank you for that. And I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure that you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements, please visit our landing page at aka.ms/security-community. These links have been already published here in the chat. And while you're there, you'll be able to find easy ways on navigate and find the resources to learning content, in fact, relevant to your security needs and the communities that we have around them. So a good start would be by browsing our bit-sized product videos, the Ninja trainings that Yuri mentioned, the recording of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve on these webinars, and please take your time by submitting your feedback. That really means a lot to us. And in case we missed to answer your questions, or if you have additional questions, you can visit Azure Security Center forum at aka.ms/ASC community. I want to thank all of you for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. And we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.